Hello, students. Welcome back. The last couple of times we've been focusing on architecture. Today's goal is to know what is medieval art look like. What were the major characteristics of medieval arts? And tomorrow, or Tuesday, we're gonna start comparing and contrasting medieval arts with Renaissance arts. Um, I have this slide, so hopefully you guys can see it. So some of the things you have to remember about medieval arts is that medieval arts is mostly all religious in subject matter. That means that most of the stuff that you see in medieval art is religious. On the left here, this one, this is a medieval painting. This is a Renaissance painting. Okay, on the left you see baby Jesus, and you see the Virgin Mary. um, this is a religious topic. In the medieval period, it was mostly all about religion. You will see that medieval art is very different than Renaissance arts in different categories. One, medieval is mostly religious. Renaissance, we're gonna see that it's very religious still, but there's also things that are secular or non-religious, like the Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa is a secular piece. She was a wife of a merchant. Another big difference is realism. On the left hand side, you see the Virgin Mary and you see Jesus, and then you see the angels, right? It's not realistic at all. The Virgin Mary, if she stands up, she will be like 12 feet tall. Jesus does not look like a baby. Um, he looks like an adult. If he stood up, he'll be bigger than the angels. And, and this is much more realistic, and we'll talk about it on Tuesday. Another big difference is the sense of perspective or sense of depth. You can tell kind of these angels are behind the Virgin Mary and Jesus, but not quite, right? There is no sense of like three dimensions or depths. That's another big difference. The Mona Lisa, Renaissance piece, you can see that there's a background in the back. Um, Medieval arts tends to be gold leaf or gold background. Gold background. Renaissance tends to be much more. There's a sense of depth or natural perspective. So don't worry too much about this side. Today we're focusing primarily on the left hand side, medieval versus Renaissance. Medieval arts, the purpose was not for the arts itself. The purpose was to teach people about religion. It didn't matter how you got there. It's just a matter of the message. So medieval art is not focusing on realism or the beauty of the art, but more like the message that the art is able to convey to the viewer. In medieval art, there is a lack of expression, lack of emotion, lack of emotion, lack of emotion. Renaissance, more emotion. Medieval stiff and unrealistic poses, kind of stiff, unrealistic. This is more realistic. Again, don't concern yourself about the Renaissance yet. We'll get to that one. Okay. Medieval art was mostly commissioned by the church. So the church was paying for a lot of the arts. So the church was able to control what was being produced. Um, Renaissance will focus on that. Here's another piece of artwork from the medieval period. The Virgin Mary with Jesus. The Virgin Mary is much bigger. Jesus is much bigger because they are the most important. In the background, you see the gold leaf again. You see the angels. They're kind of stacked on top of each other. There's no sense of perspective. Medieval art, because it is controlled by the church, does not allow for the display of the human body. It is not okay for an artwork to have a nude. It's not okay for statues to have a nude, and that's going to be very different in the Renaissance period. Um, Pictures again look very flat. There is no sense of realism. There is no sense of understanding science and what humans actually look like in their natural habitat. Again, we'll talk about the Renaissance eventually. This is the Last Supper of the medieval period. If you look at here, Jesus is much bigger because he is the most important. There is no sense of background. This is supposed to be a table, but it looks very flat. There is no sense of perspective or realism. There is no sense of depth. When we compare this to Da Vinci's Last Supper, you'll see that Da Vinci's Last Supper is much more realistic. This is a very famous painting. I think it's created by Duccio. It is the Virgin Mary. You really can't see it here. The Virgin Mary and the Christ. The Christ is supposed to be a baby, but if he stands up, he looks bigger than these people probably. Um, they lack emotion. There is no sense of perspective. These people are literally stacked on top of each other. If this was the case in real life, these people would be much smaller the further back you go. So the halos, you can't see them really well here. These halos, they're called halos. Halos and gold backgrounds symbolize residents of heaven and the holy atmosphere of heaven. We'll talk about it in the Renaissance, how that compares to the Renaissance. So the Renaissance breaks this tradition. The Renaissance is much different than this this type of art and sculpture. So do not have medieval works do not have perspective or a sense of depth. Perspective means a sense of depth. This one has perspective, a sense of depth. Um, Again, the goal of the medieval work was to show people or to teach people about religion, not necessarily to teach people about people, about humanism. It was more about the religion. And the Renaissance that changes, where people become more interested in humanism, more interested in the abilities of people and how people are different. In the medieval period, it wasn't that. It was focusing primarily on religion. Let's look at a couple. Let's look at a couple medieval works of art. This is one that I showed you already. Lack of emotion. This is another one. Again, lack of emotion. There is no sense of background or perspective. I don't even know what's going on in this one. This is the face I make when you don't do your homework. Again, lack of emotion. Not realistic at all. You'll see that once we get to the Renaissance. These artists spend years trying to figure out shadowing, trying to figure out muscle movements, trying to figure out what people actually look like. People don't look like this. People don't look like this in the medieval period. Again, it's not about the artwork itself. It's about the message that people are trying to convey. Let's look at some sculpture, because sculpture is going to be another big part of this unit. So Middle Ages sculpture. A lot of the sculpture in the Middle Ages look like this. Looks like this. This means this is in relief. In relief means that these statues, you can't walk around them. They are attached to the wall. And most of the statues are standing. A lot of this, and all of them are closed. They don't have any nudity in them. Again, most of them are attached to the walls. They are mostly religious based, and they have clothing on them. Again, the church was controlling a lot of this arts and sculpture during the medieval period, and the purpose was to teach people about religion, not something else. In the Renaissance, it's kind of like a combination of that. In the Renaissance, things change. Things become much more realistic, but there's also a reason or a purpose for doing the sculpture. In the Renaissance, you'll see that nudity is okay. Um, even when a statue is a religious piece, nudity is going to be okay in the Renaissance, because they value the human body. Medieval periods, nudity is not okay. So to summarize, medieval art, it's not realistic. It is mostly religious. It is controlled by the church. Sculpture in relief. In relief means attached to the wall, and it is mostly religious. There's a couple reasons why art is, or there's a couple examples of why art is not realistic in the Middle Ages. One, there's a lack of sense of perspective or depth. Two, there is lack of emotion, and I think that's good for now. I will be posting another video. We are going to continue working on this tomorrow on Tuesday, and we're going to begin comparing and contrasting the art of the medieval period and the Renaissance, and we are going to be working on a couple Venn diagrams. Please do the homework, or not the homework. Please do the questions. They must be done in a complete sentence, and please take the exit ticket. If you don't, I will be contacting home. See you guys later. Peace.